It's Missy. We're doing the next video in our little stuffed creature lineage here. And at this point, you should be done doing any stitching you're doing. Now, don't mind the fact that this isn't a complete monster. I'm working on my own little personal project while the kid's working on the monster, but the next step is the same. So from here, I've got all of my stitching done on my front side. Looks like so. I have my other body piece that's being cut out of this piece of fabric over here. And what I need to do is I need to put my front piece of fabric and my back piece of fabric, which for the monster should just be colors, and I need to basically sew them together to make actual little pillows. To do this, you're actually going to be sewing this stuff inside out because we are not cutting this apart yet, but when we cut it apart, we can't cut directly on our line. Everything would just fall apart. We have to give it a little bit of extra space. That extra space is called seam allowance. And we want that seam allowance to be on the inside of our little stuffed animal, which means whenever we sew it, we need to put it on, put everything on the outside. So we essentially sew inside out. Now to do that, we basically take the front side of our back fabric and the front side of our front fabric, and we put them face down. But I want you to notice that we have an immediate problem here, and that is that I cannot see my outside edge. That's where a Sharpie comes into play. Any size Sharpie works, though I do suggest that you use a color that coordinates with your colors so that you don't end up with something that just clashes really hard. Something like something that just kind of matches a little bit more works really good. And all you need to do is trace the line of your sewing that you're going to do. You also want to mark out, either on this side or on the other side, or make a mental note whenever you're sewing, a section that's going to be left open, because when we start sewing this, we need an opening to flip it right side out at. So I like to pick a side that tends to be fairly open anyway. Like for me, I like the opening area to a leg or the bottom of a neck, things like that. This neck is a little too skinny. This one's just about the right size. It's about 1 inch wide, maybe a little bit longer. Straight edges tend to be easier than curved ones, so I'm gonna have a little bit of trouble on her head, but I'll put it up here and where her hair is gonna disguise it later, so it'll be fine. But for now, we're just gonna look at this part. So now that I've got that outlined, I can see that outline on the back. Now I can use that to actually do my sewing. So I'm gonna take this, put this face to face, and I'm gonna have both of these pieces of fabric together. The one thing to double check is that you don't have any edges overhanging. So for example, this doesn't quite match up. So I'm gonna try turning this so that they will, and now they do. That means I'm not gonna have anything flying off in the wrong direction. I'm gonna ignore all those little flyaway strands. And then I'm going to mount this into my hoop, making sure that all of this is inside my hoop if at all possible. If it's too big, it's too big. I'm gonna mount it all in my hoop together. That way my hoop is holding my two pieces of fabric together while I start sewing. Now, I can start sewing pretty much anywhere, usually along one edge or the other of these little openings is gonna be a good plan. I'm gonna go ahead and start right over here and start going that way. And what you're gonna need to do is a back stitch. In this particular case, all of your thread is gonna end up on the inside of your fabric, of your little stuffed animal pillow. And so it really doesn't matter if you start from the top or the bottom in this particular case. What's going to matter is how big your stitches are. So whenever you are doing these stitches, they must remain small, like small grains of rice. If you get much bigger, then stuffing can fall out of them. If you do a running stitch, stuffing will fall out of it or the fabric will bunch. You need a back stitch, a nice looking back stitch. Now, if you get stuck somewhere and you end up flipping it over so that one side's the front and one side's the back around a corner, it really doesn't matter because as I said, all of this will eventually be on the inside. But a back stitch is the strongest hand stitch that we have. It is the strongest one that you know, and as long as you have the stitches nice and small, you're not going to run into any problems. Where you do need to be careful, however, is corners like I'm about to come up against. I'm going to hit that in about 3 or 4 stitches here. And what happens at corners is the back side of your back stitch tends to have floats. Whenever you're coming from where you went down to where you come up, there's a long stretch of string across that point. And that long stretch of string is one that we don't want to get into our corner over here, because we have to do something after we sew and after we cut apart our thread, or cut apart our pieces. And that is something called corner clipping. Corner clipping allows all the pieces, that seam allowance that we're going to have from our cutout, to stretch and bend as we flip our creature inside out, or rather right side out. And so we need to make sure that we don't accidentally cut this string when we're doing that corner clipping. So what you do when you reach a corner like this, make sure you get your stitch to go right into that corner for one, and then just do a couple loop-de-loops around each side. So I'm going to do the same stitch I just did over again. And then instead of moving forward to come up right here, which would bring that string right across that gap that I'm trying to avoid, it would come across here, and I need to do a corner clip right into that corner. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up right here and do a loop-de-loop over in this direction. So I'm going to come up in the same spot a couple times. This also gives you the added bonus of reinforcing like the tips of claws or little cinches in waist like my little nifty doll will have here. So I've just done this same stitch over again, and now this is a nice point at the same time as this being a nice point, and I can continue on my stitching like so. Again, small stitches all the way around. That's why this one tends to take a long time. The color of your thread really doesn't matter here, but it might be seen a smidgy, so do have a coordinating color the same way you do with the Sharpie. And I'm just going to continue this back stitch all the way around until I get to where I want to leave my opening. Once I have that, it's time to cut my fabric. When I cut my fabric, I will do so with a seam allowance, not quite a finger wide. So you can see that my finger can cover it up. So it needs to be about this far away. If your pieces of objects are a little bit too close together, get as close to halfway between them as you can, because you want as much seam allowance here, because this all has to fray before this seam can come undone. And as long as it's on the inside, it won't fray much, but you can't say it won't fray at all. So keep that in. Corner clipping acts like this. I'm then going to cut in towards my stitching that I've just done, like this. So cut here, and then snip in, snip in, snip in. You really want to make sure that you snip into corners, and you want to snip around sharp curves. And if you have a really long straight section, you really don't need to clip as much. But into corners is very important. And corners like this, where it's going outwards, so this one's a corner going inwards, this one's going outwards, I can straight up cut off some of this bulk, because otherwise all of this fabric will end up bunched up into her shoulder, and that can cause some problems if I'm not careful. All right, that is everything on putting your fronts and backs together and getting them all cut apart. I'll come back to you again whenever it's time to flip everything inside out and stuff it and shut it. So, see ya.